what we do here, we read philosophy papers and we try to figure out what's going on and what good things they have to say. And then at the end, we review them. As always, this is my first time reading it. Feel free to ask questions along the way. And if you stick around, we get to have a little review and that'll go up on a website. And I'll hopefully I want to work on that a little bit this week. So this is two kinds of exploratory models by Michela Massimi. And DCI says Ivan Neal was an East London gangster. He had to move to the U.S. Oh, so like Ivan Neal was like in hiding because he was a gangster. Ooh, that's cool. Then he moved to Chicago, and he's probably just a Chicago gangster now. But yeah, okay. So here we go. Give me a sec. I gotta. The Ilford boys, the old Ilford boys, yeah. Yeah. All right. And I've seen Michela Massimi. I think they're a philosopher of science. I forget, but I'll find out how this is. It's not that long, and Tindarius recommended it, so not to say that Tindarius has read it, just that they were interested in this paper. But anyway, here we go, and let me know what you think. Introduction. Much of the literature on scientific modeling. Well, drop this music a little bit. Ooh, you're visiting London this summer. I gotta get myself to Europe. Much of the literature on scientific modeling has concentrated on an important cluster of interrelated topics concerning what a model is and how models represent, just to mention two examples. Yeah, so what is it and what is it banned from the UK? Good job, it all costs money. When is the right time to suggest a paper? Anytime Luminous Bloom, just be the first one to do it. That's all. And if you want one, like, you can request to have one for next time too, also. Yeah, don't tell Interpol. Oh, dear Lord. Please do not break TOS in my chat. Yeah, Luminous, most of the time people don't suggest anything. I find something. So, it's like you can just request whatever and I'll try to get it done. And also, if you can ask, like, the only limits I usually have are page length. I don't read anything really over 16, 17, sometimes a little higher page length, but it depends. Like, this is 12 pages. I'm very happy. Yeah. So I'm competing with Tindero's Triggerfinger. Yeah, but like I said, if you request it at like the end of this stream for like the next one, or like you request one for now, then like I will, put you at the top of the queue. It all costs says, legit though, I'm unable to ever go UK unless I apply at Embassy in New York, New York. Oh, okay. Well, it happens. This stuff happens. I know people that get banned from countries. Like, you can get banned from countries for very silly reasons. Like, it's federally illegal to have any weed, of course, still in the United States, but many states now have legalized marijuana. So, like, if you do something that pisses off the federal government and you're from a different country, which you could do, even if it's not illegal in New York, you could, piss off a federal officer or something. They will ban you from the U.S., even though it wasn't even locally illegal. But, like, it happens. Yeah. Yeah, okay, so we're talking about models, though. What is a model? How does it represent? Yet there is an important function of scientific modeling that has received far less attention in the philosophical literature until recently, their exploratory function. Yeah, interstate commerce, exactly, hydrocannabinoid. I was talking to a guy who was like, because I knew a guy who was in federal prison, or somebody I worked with claimed to have been in federal prison for a little while, and I did not ask why. But one of the guys was like, how do you get yourself in federal prison? You must have done something weird. I'm like, dude, you go over state lines with like a little bit too much weed, that's a federal offense. Like, and maybe he had a bad lawyer. It's like, that's all it is. It's like, you go across state lines with actually not a crazy amount of weed. It's just sufficient weed for like a few people. Like, you will be a federal trafficking charge and you will be fucked. Fucked. Like, proper fucked. I could read 2 papers per stream, but since I've been chatting for an hour at the start of my streams, lately, I have been reading fewer. It's not as often that I read 2 papers a stream. They have to be pretty short if I do that, because I do lose my voice. And you have to understand, I don't talk this much during my day usually. And so it's not like the other people who are like professors and like are used to talking. I don't talk. I'm already starting to lose my voice. So I'm quiet. I really am. All right. The exploratory function of scientific models has traditionally been regarded as part and parcel of their representational function. On the received view, models fulfill their exploratory function by offering abstract, idealized representations of their target systems. Yeah, here's real fast. abstract and idealized. These two words don't mean anything on their own. You have to have a certain kind of abstraction, a certain kind of idealization. These just mean they are, doing something different from reality, but we always are doing something different from reality, as I was mentioning a week or two ago. If you were just going to represent reality with reality, you haven't explained anything. You just have the thing again. It's like you've just replicated the same problem. So everything we do is abstract and idealized in some way. It matters how it is abstract or idealized. Yep. Arthur says, in this paper, I argue that there is more to the exploratory function of scientific models than the received view has suggested so far. Some scientific models fulfill their exploratory function not necessarily by offering idealized yet accurate and veridical representations of the target system. In important contexts and circumstances, some scientific models fulfill their exploratory function by inviting us to instead to imagine or conceive non-veridical scenarios about target systems so as to deliver modal knowledge about what is possible. Okay, so basically that means you're making up a nice story to explain what's going on, even if it's not true. Lumen says, well, I can't talk when I spend 4 hours on stream on 5 pages of Heidegger. Yes. Lost you at modals. Modal just usually means in kind of like a mode of thought. So there's a way to think about stuff. So a lot of times common modalities, it all costs money. Say you're thinking everything in relation to money. Everything, you're like homo economicus. Everything is how, like you're in the mode of thinking everything in relation to cash. Like cash rules everything around me, cream. That's a modal way of viewing the world. You can talk about the modality of the world in the alethic modality. That's when we're talking about aletheia, truth. When you're talking about what's true or false. If you're talking about how everything relates economically, that's the economic modality. If you're talking about things that are practical, then you'd have a practical modality. You're saying, well, practically, what can I do? Now, you may have a million different things you could do possibly, but practically, there's only so many. So that's, no, not Leibniz. Well, that is kind of the thing. It's, these possible worlds, that's the metaphysical modality. So if you're talking about raw possibility, that's why you're talking about modalities. That's a different modality. That's metaphysical modality, and so that's why it gets defined in terms of modality, because it's metaphysics. But then you're talking about just abstract, just raw possibility. Yeah. So you have to think, when people say modal, it just means you're sort of focused on one aspect of reality, or in the case of metaphysics, the widest possible aspect of reality. You have Steam, right? I do technically have Steam, although, Vipers was gonna gift me a game and then saw that I have a bunch of games that I never play. Like, I don't play a lot of games, but I do have Steam, yes. I believe my name is like Interesting Typo, but I have to look it up. I can't remember if it's Interesting _typo or just Interesting Typo, but if you want to be like friends on stream, it's like, yeah, cool. Yeah. I was actually just thinking, I should go buy a new graphics card so I could do more stuff on this computer. But yeah. Yeah, so I don't care. I'm still going to gift you the game later. Just stop by my place. Okay. I was like, sure. Yeah, like I used to buy like humble bundles and like I just wouldn't play the games. You should do that? Yeah, I mean, I'm considering it. Because also, like, I've noticed that I think I'm using a Bloodborne stream. Yeah, I do not have a PlayStation. I've never played that stuff. But, what's it called? I've noticed I'm using all my memory on my graphics card. My graphics card when I'm streaming is basically maxed out. The CPU is at like a quarter. It's only a 25% CPU. But when I do like the graphics thing, the graphics memory is like topped out. And I think that's why I have some trouble sometimes. Yeah. Yeah, exactly, from Humble Bundles, but that's fine. I buy them, I don't feel that bad. Like, I like having a few of those games. I will play them, or I could play them, and like, Steam is very good about that. Like, can go back, and it should work. Like, Steam is good about, making their games work. Yeah. Alright. Yeah, so deliver modal knowledge about what is possible. So that means what is possible in some sort of physical reality, even if it isn't perfectly described by your model. Your model might be physically wrong, but it gives you suggestive ideas of how that sort of area works. Okay. 2 modeling practices are exemplary in this respect. Following Michael Weisberg's terminology, let's label them as follows. 1. targetless modeling, scientific models without a target system. Within this practice, fictional models, that is, models of knowingly false and non-existent entities along with lines of Bukolich, are particularly interesting. That's Alyssa Bukolich out of Boston University. Yeah, so what was it? Quarks or one of those things, like the subatomic molecules, they were just a mathematical construct at first. They didn't think they existed. There was just a useful fiction for describing the physical system. They didn't think the particles existed, and there's an interesting history there where the originator of the, like, let's just assume it's quarks. I can't remember if it is or not. Where the person who came up with the idea actively worked against, people like experimentalists trying to find them, because they said, no, I just made this up as a mathematical construct. There shouldn't be anything there. And so the question is, well, what's the value of the model, even though it's a good value of a model? But yeah. So, but like, yeah, so that's the sort of thing. Then just the bosons, then they found them. And then they found them. And it was like, who gets the credit for the discovery? The person who came up with the idea first, even though they said don't look for them, or the person who actually went and looked for them? Now we have that going on with string theory. Yeah, but string theory is much more difficult to prove. This was like something that was like, like any other particle. String theory is like a theory of everything, which is a very, very different stuff. Yeah, there's no way to prove that math. If there's a theory of a particle and then you get yourself a particle accelerator that can look for it, then it's like, well, okay, let's go look for it. Like, that's reasonable. Like, that's something physics do. String theory is like, it's like almost impossible to test. And if they come up with something, there could be also another theory that could usually explain the phenomenon without being a theory of everything. Okay, so this is targetless modeling. So this is when you just make up some nice fiction to talk about the mathematical reality, to be suggestive of the physical reality, but you don't actually think it has a physical analog. The quark model explained the spectrum of hadrons. There we go. Good to know. Thank you, Ivan. A little bit of history, physical history. 2. Hypothetical modeling. Scientific models whose target system is hypothetical. Within this practice, perspectival models are an important family of incompatible or even inconsistent models for the same target system. All right, I don't know what this means. The target system is hypothetical. So they are calling the system real, but it's only real in theory. So we've got multiple different ideas, but you're not saying it's just an idea. You're saying it is real, but like it's just a sort of like a conditional. We don't know. All right, I'm not exactly sure what this means yet. I'm sure they'll explain. What good are targetless and hypothetical models when it comes to explore what might be the case in nature? How can genuine modal knowledge about how things might be in nature, see again, this is the modal knowledge how things might be in nature. This is the use of modal to mean like potential. Be obtained by conceiving non-veridical scenarios in targetless and hypothetical models. The goal of this paper is to get clear about the procedures through which these two families of models respectively deliver important kinds of modal knowledge. As such, my goal is neither to advocate or criticize fictionalism about models, nor advocate or criticize the use of explanatory falsehoods in modeling. Instead, my goal is to clarify how targetless and hypothetical models successfully deliver varieties of modal knowledge in science thanks to their specific kind of imagining or conceiving non-veridical scenarios. Thinking of what goes on in scientific modeling along the lines of some kind of imagining, or to be more precise, physically conceiving of something about the target system is key to clarifying how models deliver important modal knowledge in science, notwithstanding false posits, fictional targets, or purely hypothetical entities they postulate. Hydrocannabinoid says, down quarks have negative mass. How do you measure that? The physics might have things to do that. Like, maybe you combine it with something with positive mass. If they destroy each other, then, like, how did it get destroyed? It's like they're very clever. Negative charge, not negative mass. Okay, so yeah, if they have a weird charge, you can definitely measure charge. I mean, if they have zero charge, then you have trouble measuring it. But when they have a weird, at least as long as they have a charge, then they can do it. All right. So section 2 introduces the notion of physical conceivability to describe the kind of imagining that goes on in targetless and hypothetical modeling. I analyze how fictional models, in the meaning just clarified, resort to a particular version of physical conceivability about the non-existent target. I illustrate this point with Maxwell's ether model, where the fictional model acts as a proxy for facilitating the acquisition of a particular kind of modal knowledge, that is, knowledge of what is causally possible. This is done, I contend, by ascribing essential properties in relations to the phenomena under study via law-driven analogical reasoning with concrete models in other domains. Yeah. So again, what do we do in science? Well, we're trying to come up with ideas about the way the world might be. How do we do this? How do we come up with new ideas? Well, this paper, I think, is trying to say we come up with the ideas about how the world might be in a few ways. We say, well, we're wrong, but we think this might get us somewhere to think in this way. Or we don't think we're wrong. We think, well, there's many ways it could be hypothetically, and so we can explore the range of explore the range of hypotheticals. Okay. I think I'm getting them now. So, Section 3 discusses hypothetical perspectival models, well exemplified by a plurality of models for supersymmetric particles in high-energy physics. This modeling practice deploys a slightly different notion of physical conceivability. Its purpose is to deliver modal knowledge about what might be objectively rather than causally possible about the hypothetical target system. In this case, the modal gap is filled via subjunctive conditionals that feature in bootstrapped inferences without any essential property description. All right, so this is why people hate philosophy, but this sentence is terrible because you have to know a lot of stuff. The modal gap is filled via subjunctive conditionals that feature in bootstrapped inferences without any essential property description. Yeah, yay, words, exactly. Yeah, without examples, I don't actually know what these modeling terms mean. Yeah, but thankfully, it sounds like this author is going to get to some actual stuff. I mean, I have an idea what's going on in this last sentence, but why would anyone outside of, very silly philosophers know what a subjunctive conditional in a bootstrapped inference be? Really. Without any essential property descriptions. Okay. Yeah, it's basically saying that's an empty, you're just making an empty hypothetical, but it's we're going to talk in a certain way under the supposition that the world is a certain way, just to talk it out. That's all you're saying. You're just going to talk it out as if it were real, but you don't know if it is. You're just talking it out. Yeah. Okay, how targetless fictional models act as a guide to what is causally possible. That fictional models can be a guide. And remember, if I'm saying a fictional model, it's like saying, all right, we're going to have a model of the universe we know is incorrect. So say, we're going to just say all the planets go around the sun in a circle. That's a fine way to talk about stuff for a lot of physics. You don't need to know that it's an ellipse or what's going on. You don't need to know the math, but we're just going to talk about the Earth, going around the sun in a circle. And for a little kid, that would work, and you could explain the solar system in that way. Everything just goes around the sun in a circle. And they don't know what an ellipse is, but they know what a circle is. That actually will get a little kid very far to understanding kind of how the solar system looks. So yeah, and that's a fiction. It's a fiction. A spiral ellipse, yeah. But it's wrong, but it's close enough to get the kid, going. So, that fictional models can be a guide to what is causally possible is not a foregone conclusion. For how can a model of a knowingly false or fictional target system be expected to deliver knowledge at all? In this section, I argue that fictional models can, in fact, act as a guide to knowledge of causal possibilities in interesting and unexpected ways. Targetless fictional models, I maintain, invite scientists to physically conceive non-veridical scenarios about a non-existent target system. The goal is to allow scientists to explore possible causal mechanisms behind a given phenomena of interest for which the non-existent fictional target provides a proxy. But what is physical conceivability to start with? Physical conceivability is a kind of epistemic conceivability that is consistent with known laws of nature. Here's a first stab at a definition. P is physically conceivable for an epistemic subject S. That'd be like a person like you. You are an epistemic subject or an epistemic community C, if S's or C's, imagining that P not only complies with the state of knowledge and conceptual resources of us, but is consistent with the laws of nature known by us. Yeah, so it has to abide by the physical laws of nature that we know. And that's not terrible. In targetless fictional models, scientists often conceive properties and relations in a given non-existent target system. Yeah, so you could imagine a toy system where one planet is going around the sun, and that's non-existent, but it could be, it could be that only the Earth is going around the sun. And then you could say, all right, that and it's following all the same laws of physics. It's just not, there are no other planets, and so it's false. Yeah. Hydrogen Cannabinoid says even the sun circles the center of gravity between it and Jupiter. I heard. Yeah. So there is little bits of motion because the gravities of the planets will affect the gravity of the sun. So there's a give and take there, of course. Yeah, absolutely. So, and there's like wobble and stuff. Like there's wobble in quantum phenomena due to like principles where you can't know exactly where things are and they're wobbling. And so like subatomic particles wobble, planets wobble, and there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on. But how do you conceive of all of this? Well, sometimes you have to simplify. So you conceive of properties in relation in a given non-existent target system. The goal is to identify a possible causal mechanism behind a given phenomenon that the fictional target system is a proxy for. This conceivability exercise is driven by laws of nature in that some of the properties and relations attributed to the fictional target system mimic analogically properties and relations that, according to the known laws of nature, are typically attributed to non-fictional concrete target systems that serve as a template for fictional models. Yeah, so this is like, if anyone here took a little bit of physics in college, you know that like electrons do not orbit the nucleus of an atom like planets around the sun. But there was an old theory where electrons do orbit the nucleus of an atom like planets around the sun. So basically, let's do a little drawing. Like, so here, like you could have like, okay, there's your nucleus and those are your electrons, okay? It's a boob or an eye or something. So it's like, this is like one theory. That's not how things actually are in reality. The reality is, it's like you've got the nucleus there and then like you've got a cloud in like shapes that look like this in like the simplest model. So like there's a cloud of electrons here, above and below. And like that's it. Like you can't say it orbits, but like to get like the first pass, you need to like do something. You need to be like, okay, the electron in the helium atom orbits around the nucleus, but then it's not true. It's like probabilistic in some weird shapes. And why is it that way? I guess the physicists know, but like this is it. Hey, Sayeb, what's up? Welcome in over on Kick. And so like, yeah, we try to like explain stuff. Beautiful painting, Picasso. Thank you. Yeah. This is actually one of my deficiencies. I'd like to be able to draw better. Now, you can explain that, but it's like, it's false. But like, again, you can get very far explaining an atom with an electron with like, treating it like an orbit, like it was a planet. Okay, so here's their author's example. Consider, for example, Maxwell's honeycomb model of the ether, which assumes an ether with hexagonal vortices that, by rotating, generated a magnetic field. What the fuck? All right. Whose strength was assumed to be proportional to the angular velocity of the vortices. Okay, so magnets create hexagonal honeycomb models in space. That's the ether with vortices, and that's what magnets do. They're creating vortices within space. Maxwell's 1861-62 model is a targetless fictional model. Maxwell referred to it as a collection of imaginary properties and not even a hypothetical fluid. Maxwell's honeycomb model of the ether delivered modal knowledge about what is causally possible in the phenomena of electromagnetic induction. Despite being the model of a non-existent object, the ether, and hence involving non-veridical representations, the honeycomb model was a guide to knowledge of causal possibilities obtained through analogy with concrete models in hydrodynamics. Yeah, so basically, Maxwell was using a theory from water, like a vortice that like could suck down, like would have properties, and saying, okay, that's what's actually happening in like space. Near magnets, it's creating vortices and pulling things down like a vortice might suck down water. I actually wonder if this history is right. Like, there used to be ether theories, and so the idea that like they were saying that the ether theory wasn't actually real, like, is that what Maxwell said, or is that like a hindsight? I don't know. Like, that's a historical question. But like, yeah, so the ether again is like, if you're treating space like it was a physical object. In our current theories, space is not a physical object. In quantum theory, there is nothing there. It's just empty space, and things pop out of like particles pop out of space. Now in general relativity, you're bending space-time. So like the ether then, like the fabric of space is bending. So it's like kind of like an ethery thing. It's weird. Ether is like space-time. Hey, would say, hey, Saheb's also on Twitch now, as opposed to a Kick. But you can be on both. Yeah, so ether was thrown out, but there's weird ethery disagreements about the nature of reality between quantum theory and general relativity. Yeah. Ivan says, in 1861, the ether was assumed to exist as a medium for electromagnetic waves phenomena. Yeah, so I don't like this paragraph that I just read, because they're saying that it is a non-existent object, the ether, right here. Like, they just said this. And so, yeah, the history, I think they got their history wrong. Now, in retrospect, you could have, like this is not like their example is technically wrong, but, like, it could have happened this way. So, like, I don't quite love this because it seems, like, historically inaccurate, but assume in 1861 they had already come up with general quantum theory and they no longer believed in ether. And like, or whatever it was. I may be getting this backwards. I apologize if I did. Yes, it is the biggest problem. And people are trying to solve the gravity versus quantum stuff at all cost money. It's ongoing. But yeah, so that was an aside. I don't like this. Like, their example works. You just have to assume that they didn't have an ether theory in 1861, which they did. And then did Maxwell actually think the ether theory was correct? Because maybe Maxwell did not subscribe to that ether theory. I don't know, but it's kind of not here nor there. But again, their example's okay. It's just a little bit funky. In the late 1820s and the early 1930s, Michael Faraday made important discoveries about the phenomenon of electromagnetic induction, following up on the early work of Hans Christian Ørsted. Ivan says, so by non-existent object, they mean non-existent by today's lights. Yeah, and that's a problem. They shouldn't have said that there. They should mean non-existent by today's lights, but like at the time, it should have been non-existent also. Because they're going to want to make the claim that you can do the same thing today, which you can. You can say, look, I know this is wrong. Like, I know that we're not using an ether theory now, but I'm going to use an ether theory because it's convenient and it works out for like the conceptually, so that we might think of the area. And so in the last analysis, we're gonna have to get rid of the ether theory, but we don't have to do it yet. And like, that's what the author is gonna want to say here. And so this isn't so says, yeah, gravity is an observation, but the reality for it is still not well understood. Yeah, we don't have a good, general relativity is our best theory of gravity. But, again, general relativity does not work 100% with quantum mechanics, and so we do not have a unified physics in that regard. But they claim Maxwell said his model was wrong at the time. Maybe it is the hexagonal vortices that he thought was fictional. Yeah, see, that's the problem. Like, that paragraph was unclear. Like I said, they might be right or they can make it work. But like, if anyone knows the specific history there, I know there's a question, like, what is the actual history? All Cost Money says you're gonna brave the ether and take your future self to the store. See you in the future. Say hi to future at All Cost Money for us. It all costs money. So thanks for the lurk, appreciate it. Say E-Hub, it's the extremes we don't understand, like atomic reality moves at a different scope. Light, gravity, however, much weaker at macro. Yeah. Don't get swept down to the solar system. Yes. Be safe out there. Don't get caught. Yeah, so, but these are like sort of historical and like ancillary concerns. The idea is that you can make a theory is wrong if it has nice properties you want, and those nice properties let you allow you to think about what you want to think about. You're just going to ignore the problems for now. And we do this all the time. And that's, I think, what the point of the paper at the moment. Okay. Electromagnetic induction is the surprising phenomena whereby the passage of electricity in a wire is able to twist sideways a nearby magnetic needle, as first observed by Ørsted, as much as the movement of a magnet inside a metal ring wrapped with electric wires induces a displacement of the electric current inside the wire, as Faraday first recorded. Yeah, so if you didn't know, running electricity will create a magnetic field. and you can, like, if you make you wrap up the wire, you can build up the magnetic field. And so it's like, this is how motors run. Electric motors, you send electricity through the wires and they're wrapped up in a certain configuration, and that creates a magnetic field, which then there's a magnet in there that starts spinning, and that's what an electric motor is. It's a magnet that spins due to the electric current. And that's all. I mean, it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I mean, that's all a electric motor is. It's a wire, electricity, and a magnet. It all costs money. I used to have dreams about that as a kid, recurring nightmare falling up into nothingness. Ooh, scary. Okay. These experiments offered the first evidence that an important connection existed between electricity and magnetism. Faraday was able to formulate a law for electromagnetic induction, which related the electricity induced in the wire, or better, its induced voltage, to the rate of change over time of the magnetic field, conceived by Faraday as a magnetic lines of force or magnetic flux around the coil. But what was the causal mechanism responsible for electromagnetic induction? How can magnetic lines of force induce electricity in a nearby wire? Throughout the 19th century, scientists came up with elaborate models of the ether in the hopes of answering this question. Among them, James Clerk Maxwell, 30 years after Faraday's discovery, built his ether model based on an analogy with hydrodynamics. Maxwell was aware of Helmholtz's work on hydrodynamics and vortex fluid, and came up with an intentionally fictional honeycomb model of the ether, whereby Faraday's lines of magnetic force could be thought of as analogous with lines of fluid motion, and electric displacement as analogous with rotation in fluid. Maxwell's fictional model, I contend, delivered modal knowledge about how the magnetic field might cause electric displacement in the wire by imagining that there was a specific relation between the strength of the magnetic field, or better, its rate of change over time, and the displacement of electric current, or better, the induced voltage in the wire. Yeah. Say Hub says, if you think about water is the gaseous version of salt. How is the water gaseous version of salt? Salt is a different thing from water. So I don't know how would I think about that then? You keep trying to leave and we suck you back in through the honeycomb vortexes in the ether. This is an exercise in physical conceivability, or better, in a first variety of it. Let us call it physical conceivability LD. Now we're arguing about, chemistry. Maybe Lumpy can correct us if salt is the gaseous form of water. That'd be interesting, though. Okay, that can be better qualified as law-driven conceivability. Laws of nature, in this case Faraday's law of electromagnetic induction, but also Helmholtz's equations for fluid dynamics, drove the analogical reasoning with fluid dynamics upon which Maxwell patterned his ether model. This law-driven exercise of imagining perfectly spherical cells moving along hexagonal cylinders in an elastic ether, in analogy with water vortices, led Maxwell to his breakthrough. Namely, the discovery that the elasticity of the medium for electromagnetic induction, magnetic ether, was one and the same as the elasticity of the medium for transmission of light, luminiferous ether. From there, the step to the conclusion that light was, after all, nothing but an electromagnetic wave was a short one. In the following decade, leading to his treatise on electricity and magnetism in 1873, Maxwell abandoned the model of the ether and codified the equations for the electromagnetic field that bear his name. The honeycomb model of the ether proved a crucial stepping stone in this breakthrough. Say says, well, the lightest element, but still becomes solid believably, so under high pressures, forming bonds more stably than salt, ironically again. Okay. So yeah, maybe you can describe them in some similar ways, but yeah, we know better now. Salt is not water. Okay, so basically the author is saying the history here. This honeycomb model enabled Maxwell to, make some connections between other stuff, and then, you get Maxwell's equation, which describes light much better. So he got rid of his assumption about the honeycomb model and vortices once he was able to move beyond that. But he needed something as a stepping stone to get to his later equations, which we still have, Maxwell's equations. Lead is almost gold. I mean, if you figure out just, how to do transmutation, then it is. Yeah. Now you're lurking. Okay. Lurking twice. Got the double lurk. Yeah. Maxwell's model illustrates the way in which targetless fictional models, by and large, act as a guide to knowledge of causal possibilities via analogical reasoning with concrete models in other fields, be it Fourier's treatment of heat flow behind Lord Kelvin's vortex sponge ether model, or Helmholtz's fluid dynamics behind Maxwell's honeycomb model. Oh dear, now we're arguing actual chemistry. Analogical reasoning allows targetless fictional models to attribute properties to an otherwise purely imaginary and non-existent target system, ether, in analogy with the property attribution that goes on in concrete models, say hydrodynamic models. Fictional models ultimately deliver important modal knowledge about what is causally possible concerning a phenomena under study, for example, electromagnetic induction, by attributing a fictional entity some essential properties and relations P1 to Pn, R1 to Rj, which via suitably keying are translated into essential properties and relations Qs and Ts imputed to the phenomenon. Okay. They made a jump right here. They're saying, look, we're thinking analogically, like the, subatomic physics is kind of like water physics. The hydrodynamics is kind of like, magnetism. And then you're just saying the same things that happen in magnetism are going to be very similar to things that happen in water. Really? Are they? Sometimes they are. And it's not a bad thing. It's just I'm a little worried about the language you're saying. Because it's like, what is causally possible? Well, no. This is giving it a certain limit to the possibilities. But it's like, what is the important modal knowledge about what is causally possible? I'm not 100% sure. Yeah. So it's interesting as water inspired the idea of ether. Yeah, this is the point, is that that's right. That you can think about these things analogically. Like an analog, one is analogous to the other. But what does this actually mean that you're getting important modal knowledge about what is causally possible? I don't know if it's that you're getting knowledge. Like that just seems very strong, actually. This claim about knowledge. You're getting some sort of understanding in your model. But are you getting knowledge? Knowledge just seems like a very strong statement there under most understandings of knowledge. Like you're getting sort of like a raw possibility space given your understanding of an analogy. I don't know if that's knowledge, but like it's something. Okay. By physically conceiving, and this is like the law model, of an ether with the essential properties of hexagonal cylinders and idle wheels, Maxwell's fictional model could explore the possible causal mechanism for electromagnetic induction. The model did not identify the ether as the causal mechanism, for the model was not meant to be an accurate or veridical representation of any actual or even possible state of affairs in nature. Instead, the model allowed to explore the phenomenon of electromagnetic induction by ascribing some essential properties to a fictional target that could be used as a proxy to understand how, for example, a magnetic field might causally induce electric current in a wire. For example, how strong a magnetic field would have to be for an electric displacement to be generated, whether the electric displacement would depend on the nature of the electric, and so on. Sei Hub says, magnetism is a broad field of charge, and water is a complex arrangement of charges, an overall neutral charge, though, unlike a magnetic field. Yeah, I mean, and the idea that, like, water, it doesn't have to be water. It was just fluid dynamics. Like, it's just, you don't need it to be water. It needs to be any fluid. So it's not even like water with the charge. It was the idea that there's a fluid here. They're treating the ether like a fluid. Like, air is a fluid, like it doesn't need to be water. It could be any substance, like, a nitrogen gas. It acts like a fluid under certain conditions. So it's like, but the idea that you're going to treat the ether as the same way as a fluid and use the, like, hydrodynamics there. It's like, yeah, that's the interesting thing. It's not that there was charge and charge. It was that, like, you're treating, like, the ether like air, kind of. And you could have vortexes in air, of course. Like, you just you have a fan. That's a vortex. Okay. And I don't like how long this paragraph is. Like, this paragraph is like fucking, like, this sentence was like this long. Okay. The exploratory nature of Maxwell's model consisted in its ability to deliver useful modal knowledge about the causal possibilities through an exercise of physically conceiving. That's law-based conceiving, because the laws of ether were going to be like the laws, or the laws of charge, and magnetism were going to be like the laws of hydrodynamics. A knowingly non-existent entity, ether, is having some essential properties and relations, and see how far the analogy with water's vortex motion could lead. This modal knowledge gained via analogical reasoning with concrete models. Again, this is, I don't like the use of the word knowledge here. This modal, what would I call this? This, what are we going to call this? It's not possibilities, because that's too general. This modal insight. It's just like an insight. It's not even a knowledge. Modal insight gained via analogical reasoning with concrete models. You're gaining insight into the potential ways it could be like some other system, and by giving it a certain abstraction, you're just getting insight. You're not getting knowledge. Yeah. They claim, though, that electromagnetism had its limits. Who claim? Who's the they? And what was the limits then? Okay. But this exercise also has its glaring limits. Okay, if you were just going to the next sentence, sure. Analogical reasoning with concrete models can lead to misleading essential property attribution. For example, the fictional ether got ascribed some classical quantities, for example, momentum, in analogy with fluid motion, as if momentum were a kinematic property of the structural bearer inside the ether, be it vortices, gyroscopes, or else, rather than a dynamical property of the electromagnetic field. This misleading essential property attribution led to the failure of an entire tradition of mechanical models of the ether in the 19th century, and it reveals the shaky foundations on which this exercise in physical conceivability, the law-based, it rested. Taking heat flow or fluid flow as an analog upon which to model property ascription to the electromagnetic field has its limits, as the history of ether models in the 19th century shows. Nonetheless, the physical conceivability afforded by ether models turned out to be crucial in the exploratory process that led to the development of electromagnetic theory. Yeah, so this is, it's kind of funny here. They just said that, like, in this, where is it? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, right here. The failure of an entire tradition of mechanical models of the ether. They knew, as Ivan pointed out, because he knows his physics, that there was an ether theory, even though they said there wasn't an ether theory for Maxwell earlier. And that's a little bit weird. And then again, they just said knowledge right up here, and then they say it wasn't actually true because it was not exactly right, because they just said that right over here, that it has its limits. So it's like it wasn't actually knowledge, it was kind of wrong. So again, you were looking at exploratory insight gained via analogical reasoning, but I wouldn't have called it knowledge. It seems just shaky in terms of like epistemic terminology. Not the worst thing in the world, but for a philosopher like me, this is throwing me off when you're using like words that, have different connotations. This is not how you should be using knowledge in this context if you're going to, in the next paragraph, say, well, it was wrong. All right. How hypothetical perspectival models act as a guide to what is objectively possible. And it is not just targetless fictional models that deliver important modal knowledge in science. Hypothetical perspectival models, if I have to say this a million times, I'm going to kill somebody, prove equally pivotal to exploring what might be the case in nature. This is well exemplified by the bewildering plurality of hypothetical models currently employed by particle physicists to search for supersymmetric particles. Long theorized to fill some gaps in the current standard models, for example, the naturalness problem, among others, supersymmetric particles, SUSY, have not been found as of today. In this section, I briefly present one influential modeling practice to search for SUSY at the Large Hadron Collider, that's CERN. This modeling practice, I argue, deploys a slightly different notion of physical conceivability qua law-bounded conceivability for the purpose of delivering modal knowledge about what I call objective possibilities. Those are possibilities concerning the very existence of the model's hypothetical target system. Physical conservity, that's law-based, not law-bounded, is an exercise in conceiving or imagining something, for example, properties or behaviors, about the hypothetical entity with the goal of facilitating inferences about its very existence, rather than identifying causal mechanisms for phenomena that the target system is a proxy for. Here, laws of nature do not directly drive the conceiving or the analogical reasoning behind it. Laws of nature fix instead the nomological boundaries, that's the law-like boundaries, within which inferences about the hypothetical target system can take place. As a result, physical conceivability LB acts as a guide to different kinds of modal knowledge in science as knowledge of objective possibilities, that is, knowledge of what is objectively possible in nature. Okay, so you're not trying to figure out what the laws are, you're just trying to figure out what the limits are. What is possible, not what actually the laws are, but you're trying to figure out what the limits of nature are. Okay. That was a lot of words just to say, we're not figuring out the laws, we're just figuring out the limit of the laws. A lot of big words to say that. This is a weird word. Exemplarily illustrated by models of supersymmetric particles at the LHC, the Large Hadron Collider. One of the most difficult tasks for the particle physics community at the LHC is to devise modeling techniques that, by conceiving of hypothetical SUSY particles as being thus and so within a broad nomological constraints, can provide an effective method for hunting them, assuming they exist. Ivan, you are giving the woke people shit for their terminology. This is not a woke person here, but the terminology is shit. I'm sorry. This is like I know what's going on, but if this person wanted anyone else to read their paper besides very dorky philosophers of science, that's not happening. Like, I understand what's going on. I don't know if you guys do, but I've done a shit ton of philosophy of science. Me, Luminance, who used to do philosophy of science, and maybe some of the other science people here, but Jesus Christ, dude. Yeah, you're honestly not fully understanding. Yeah, this is hardcore philosophy of science talk in some sense. And I think this person's more of a physicist, and it's they're using philosophy of science talk a little excessively. And it's come on, don't need to do that. All right, the modeling technique. If you have any questions, let me know, because I do have some sort of idea what's happening here. Like I said, they're basically not trying to guess the laws of the electromagnetics like they were before by using hydrodynamics. Now they're trying to guess the limits of what exists. So they don't know the laws, but they're just saying what are the bounds of the laws? What are the limits of that? Because that's what they want to push in the Large Hadron Collider. Is well, if you get something to this energy, then we should see something, because that's where the law breaks down. That's all. But again, they're trying to break the laws. They're not trying to find the laws. All right, so the modeling techniques in question are an example of hypothetical perspectival models. That is, models that play with physically conceivable scenarios about a putative entity, zeta, so as to allow scientists to infer some of the very many and inconsistent possible ways in which zeta might exist in nature. Yeah, so again, what are the limits so that we can go look at where we might find some things. We're not trying to find the laws. We're just trying to find where we can actually find some interesting stuff. One of such modeling techniques takes the name of phenomenological minimal supersymmetric model, or a pessimism at C. Atlas and Massimi for a discussion. The discussion of PMS SM19 is to physically conceive a plurality of SUSY scenarios within broad nomological constraints, that is, R parity conservation and consistent electroweak symmetry breaking, among others. Yeah, you have to know a lot of physics and philosophy of science to get this. But again, like I said, they're just trying to push their physical systems to the limits. Yeah, you got to reread every sentence. Yeah. This is how it goes in philosophy of science sometimes. Each of these different scenarios, or to use a more precise terminology, model points, portrays SUSY particles. Yeah, so they're just looking for particles. They're SUSY. They're sus. Yeah, they're sussy particles. That's what we got. Sussy particles. Very sus. That might have inconsistent mass value assignment and inconsistent decay modes. Each model point assigns different numerical values to the 19 parameters so that the same hypothetical sussy particles, for example, Higgsino, might end up having a mass of 2,800 gigavolts in a model point, or a mass of 40,000 GeV in another model point, and different decay modes too. Out of the 500 million model points originally conceivable, the Alice collaboration initially sampled 310,327 model points, which were randomly selected. Physicists do not even know whether there are sussy particles after all, and no insight of putative essential properties is intended to be delivered by the PSSM-19, whose task is not to offer an accurate or veridical representation of what might there be, but instead to trim down the bewildering space of 500 million conceivable model points to a more manageable size. Yeah, like I said, they don't want to know what the laws are, they're just trying to find the limits of what we can actually talk about here. So you've got a model of where the limitations of the laws might be. So you're just cutting down the space of the possibilities here. You're not trying to find out what the law is, you're trying to find out what the space that the law might exist in is. Thus, here we have another interesting example of how exploratory models are a vehicle to modal knowledge without necessarily offering an accurate or veridical representation. Yeah, I mean, this makes sense. If you're just trying to cut down on the questions you have to ask, because you've got 500 million possibilities, you have to cut down the questions you have to ask. You say, well, what's ridiculous? And we're going to come up with a ridiculous scenario, and we'll rule that out, and that will rule out hopefully some of the 500 million things. So you're thinking of things that are necessarily false, but that will likely rule out a part or like some portion of the state space of possibilities that are there. And yeah, and that's the goal here. I know that's a bit of a mess, but like, yeah, you're just cutting down on the questions you have to ask. And so you have a model of the questions you have to ask, not of the way the world actually is. The PMS SM19 has a primarily exploratory function in that it allows physicists to randomly select a large number of model points with the hope that by sampling a sufficiently high number of them, sussy particles, were they to exist, could be hunted. The PMS SM19 helps physicists to model a number of physically conceivable scenarios within broad laws of nature so that the theoretically pathological scenarios get discarded immediately. Again, with the words, this person, come on. I mean, all of a sudden they're saying theoretically pathological. You're mixing your subjects. When they say inconsistent, they mean mutually inconsistent. Yes. Hype AD, philosophy does rule. Just been my last paper for your philosophy BA. Congratulations, Hype. Congratulations. Philosophy BA can be a real pain in the ass. Congratulations. Proud of you. You got that. You got it done. That's usually the most important thing. It's not always perfect, but it's done. And so good on you getting that submitted. Yeah, I wrote a lot of philosophy papers in college. Just got to get it handed in. Okay. Yeah, so welcome in. It says your first time chat, so welcome in. What I do here is we usually chat a bit at the start of stream, and then we read a paper, try to figure out what's going on in it. I start losing my mind about this point. 2 to 3 hours. I completely lose my mind at 3 hour mark. But yeah, and I try to explain it. At the end, I really am losing it. We rate the paper. Like there's a whole rating scheme. You get a rubric. So if you just submitted your last paper, we have a rubric where we can rate the paper, and you get to use emotes, and the emotes will go up on a web page, and you'll the whole thing will be there. Yeah. It was indeed tough. Yeah. No more classes with Tyler Bergs for you. Good for you. No more philosophy classes. All done. Yay. Yeah. Yeah, so take a look at this. These are my emotes, and there's also a vote meh. Future past me is now present. Oh, hi, future all cost money. How you doing? I said hi to past future me at the store as a request. I appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, so you can see we have little emotes here, and you can the one's an Ouroboros, one's a knife, one's a scream, and so we have little ways of describing the paper. So this paper here, it's already it's using so much jargon. It's going to be a little bit of a navel-gazing paper. I can already tell you, nog navel. That's the fourth from the left. That's the little bit of a nog navel going on there. So, but we'll get to it. Okay. You've been listening. I do appreciate the lurk. Thank past It All Costs Money when you see him. To thank when current It All Costs Money runs into past It All Costs Money, thank past It All Costs Money for lurking. I appreciate following along. Yeah. Okay. The task then becomes how to rule out with 95% confidence large portions of these physically conceivable scenarios using experimental evidence coming from proton-proton collisions at the LHC. Sussy perspectival models do not ascribe essential properties to hypothetical entities. Instead, they model the many possibilities and inconsistent ways Sussy particles could be produced so as to exclude those not supported by experimental data. Yeah. Who cares how you rule them out? You're just trying to cut down on the possibilities. Hey, welcome in. Yeah. So yeah, drop a follow or whatever, and I do this Sundays and Wednesdays usually. Appreciate you being here. All right, Sussy PMSSM19 perspectival models fill the gap between physical conceivability and objective possibilities, then not via essential property ascriptions mediated by analogical reasoning, as with targetless fictional models. What the fuck was that sentence? Yeah, like, seriously. But whatever. Okay. But instead by delivering a particular type of how possible inferences. How could x1 to xz be possible were y1 to yn physically conceived, thus and thus so. Yeah, so it's like, given a whole bunch of possibilities, can we like sort of exclude certain things, and can we measure that? For example, how could the Higgs-Zeno decay where the model pair point some number fine-tuned in this way? At any conceivable model point that has not been ruled out at a 95% confidence level by experimental evidence coming from a proton-proton collision at the LHC remains a live objective possibility. But here's a worry. How can Sussy perspectival models reliably track what there might exist? Is there not a genuine risk of treading water in the conceivability exercise given the hypothetical nature of the target system? As indeed some physicists feel about the Sussy models and the lack of progress in finding evidence for them as of today. This worry might be deflated. Consider the distinctive bootstrapping procedure through which new pieces of experimental evidence in the how possible inferences... What? Yeah, I missed this word. Consider the distinctive bootstrapping procedure through which new pieces of experimental evidence enter in the how possible inferences to provide a firm anchor for what might be the case under antecedently assumed physical conceivability scenarios. Again, with the senses here. They're just saying how, you have to say, can we rule out certain models or certain ideas? That's it. That's all they're saying there. Like, how possible. That's all it is. How could certain things be possible? Can we rule out that they might be possible? As new pieces of experimental evidence are brought in, they refine the how possible inferences by excluding more and more of the live objective possibilities. This is because new evidence gradually and increasingly constrains what is physically conceivable, that is, the antecedents of how possible inferences. Yeah, how certain things could be gets ruled out over time. Via bootstrap, more and more stringent how possible inferences are obtained so that more and more possible Sussy particles get excluded with high confidence level as new energy regions at the LHC are probed. So now we've got this sort of model showing here. So you ask certain things, you get experimental evidence, and then all of a sudden you have to restrict what is possible, and then you do a new experiment. So you got run 1, run 2 here, and that's the thing. If only this person expressed this in Bayesian terms. No, I don't know if that would have helped anything they were saying here, but yeah, I mean, possibly, but I guess maybe this one thing here, this would work. Yeah, actually, this one would work. You could say, look, we're ruling more and more things out as you're changing the priors. That's fine. You could do that. I mean, the rest of this stuff is just like, oh my God, though. Because they're trying to, make it sound physical, like terms of the physics. And to do that, that's not Bayesian. To do that, they have to say, well, look, these possible subjunctive things get ruled out. And so it's like, well, is that really helpful to non-Bayesians? See, here, Ivan, here's the question. If you're presenting this to non-Bayesian epistemologists, presenting it in Bayesian terms might not be any better. Presenting it in these terms, I don't think is very helpful to anyone, but again, I don't know. Well, again, if they're not Bayesians, would they understand it? Would they understand Bayes? Maybe. I don't know. But yeah, this is frying my brain. Yeah, so this is the bootstrap. You just try certain things, you rule out a few things, you try something else, you rule out something else, and eventually you get somewhere where you start to realize, hey, we have to look in this area. That's the bootstrap. To illustrate the bootstrap at work in these how possible inferences, let us go back to our example. The Atlas collaboration uses the PMS SM19 with minimal nomological constraints, so R parity exactly conserved among others. Yeah, so minor constraints, that's it. The resulting 500 million model points were indirectly constrained using experimental evidence coming from the measurement of the Higgs mass, electroweak measurement, and heavy flavor physics, among others. Only 310,327 model points survived this first round, and they were tested against 22 run 1 searches, which trimmed them down to 183,800 about model points. These surviving 183,800 model points featured objectively possible sussy particles that were in turn the object of further comparisons with run 2 searches at higher 13 teravolt energies. So other things. The outcome, Bar and Liu 2017, was that 15.7% of the model points surviving run 1 were excluded by earlier searches in run 2, as figure 1 and 2 show. This gray hatched area. You can see down here, they're saying this gray stuff, this is what got ruled out in the gray region. Okay. So, they're saying big words again. Figure 1 indicating the excluded region from run 1 at 8 teravolts for a hypothetical gluino-neutralino process, and the black area around it indicating the new exclusion region from run 2 at the 13 teravolt for the same process. Yeah, so you can see here in this left one, you can't quite see, like this gray region here, and then the black is what got ruled out afterwards. And so then you can see then there's only this other area afterwards. Tindarius says, my embodied consciousness persists within the spatiotemporal coordinates of this present moment. Yes, exactly. That's so clear. Okay, so we got labels on these things. So further run 2 analyses from proton-proton collisions at the LHC are likely to trim down the number of possible surviving model points even further. Yeah, so you're at 183,000, down from 5 million. That's pretty good. And the question that looms large for the future of the LHC is how to go about probing higher energy regions, which are currently not accessible within the LHC energy regimes. Scientists might have very good theoretical reasons for thinking that sussy particles exist, that is, the naturalness problem, hierarchy problem, among others. They might have very sophisticated modeling practices for exploring what might be objectively possible, but ultimately it is only incoming new experimental evidence that constrains and bootstrappingly refines how possible inferences so as to make more and more educated guesses on which sussy particles, if any, there might be. You know, this is really weak. Really, really weak. Like, this is, just undermining everything they just said. Because this is, again, what I was saying, this is a bit of a problem with this paper. I was complaining about their use of the word knowledge earlier. I'm having trouble breathing as a first concluding sentence. I can't stop laughing. Yeah, well, this is the end of the paper, actually. But you can see, right here they say it is only new experimental evidence that actually constrains. And so the problem is, what did you actually learn from the big words earlier in the paper? They're saying, look, you made up all this stuff, but they were calling that knowledge, but then they say the only real stuff is the experimental evidence. They are misusing the terminology throughout the paper, and then at the end of each section, they have to walk it back because it's not actually what they meant to say. The overarching goal of the paper was to get clear, yes. Okay. The overarching goal of this paper was to get clear on the exploratory functions of 2 main classes of models, targetless fictional models and hypothetical perspectival models. In both these modeling practices, the exploratory function consists in imagining or physically conceiving non-veridical scenarios about a target system which is either known to be non-existent or just hypothetical. The upshot of this exercise is to be able to explore what is either causally or objectively possible, and the procedures through which fictional models and perspectival models respectively deliver kinds of modal knowledge is either via property ascription to a fictional target acting as a proxy for a phenomenon of interest, or via bootstrapped how possible inferences that get refined as more evidence becomes available. In either case, this is yet another powerful illustration of how models are able to carve out the space of what is possible, notwithstanding their false or hypothetical posits. And now we get to rate the paper. Here we go. Boom. Let me know how you feel about this. There was nothing clear in this paper. Now, I have to say, I understood what they were doing. I don't understand the physics, but I actually understood what they were saying. Because I have a background, I did a lot of philosophy of science when I was in college. This paper makes way more sense after seeing the figures. That's helpful. Actually, I think you have a point there. I know you can't really see behind the review screen. So yeah, anyone who's new here, what we do is we review the paper. If this paper had fun ideas, you type in brain dance. These are better TTV emotes. If you only see the text, you can install the plugin on Twitch or wherever, and you will be able to actually see them. So Ivan says nay. He says vote nay, does not like it. Said it was gave it the grapes, for the shriveling grapes, for big claims that shrivel up, and the turd. It was all cell, no substance. So yeah, this is how you do. If you thought this was fun, you give it a thing. If you think it made big claims that shrivel up, you give it the grapes. If it was navel gazing, then it's only for academics. Ouroboros for deeper ancient ideas. Nog scream, you've got existential or artistic drama. If it all costs money. If you want your review to be recorded, you actually have to do it. So just copy and paste from Ivan if you can. But I'm not going to be able to unless you want me to. If you just draw an arrow, what Ivan says, that doesn't get recorded. Tindarius says liked it, but it was massively navel gazing. Yeah. Luminous says I'm always rating this paper at the end of the day. My brain is fried. I can't feel it. Judge. Luminance, I don't care. It does not matter how you feel about it. You are still in chat, and that for allows you to rate it. So I don't care. Thank you. It all costs money. Makes no sense to you, and claims that are incomprehensible get 0 points from you. Okay, I get the idea. They're just trying to look. You're making up scenarios in your mind, even though you know they're kind of fictional, but they have enough overlap with reality that it gives you more ideas or cuts out bad ideas. You're saying, look, I know I'm not dating Scarlett Johansson, but I can think about this situation as if I were dating Scarlett Johansson. What would be some things that would be good if I was dating Scarlett Johansson? And then I can think of this hypothetical reality that has nothing to do with my life, but maybe I would come up with some good gifts for somebody else. And all of a sudden I have some good gifts for somebody else. Like if I was thinking, what would I get Scarlett Johansson? But I am not dating Scarlett Johansson, but maybe that would be a good exercise for me to think of some good gifts. And then that narrowed the range of possibilities of good gifts that I think are good to give to people, because I came up with this silly scenario that has nothing to do with reality, but it had enough overlap. I do have to give gifts to people every so often. So it's like you come up with a silly scenario just to get the the thoughts flowing, and that can help you because the silly scenario can have overlap with reality. That's what it is. Shane, how you doing? What's going on, Shane? We just went through a very, very silly paper on philosophy of science, but that's okay. I mean, I understood it. I don't expect a whole lot of other people. But, Shane, let's give Shane a shout out. Anyone doesn't know Shane? Shane is a historian and sociologist, does history and mostly history streams, and also builds Gundams. But he's basically all of our go-to when we have questions about actual world things. If I ever leave my armchair, I know I'm fucked. But if I have questions about things, Shane's the go-to man. He knows stuff. So he's also kind of good at epistemology. So Luminance says that, yeah. Let's see. So Ivan says, what's the difference between what they describe and between people proposing mathematical models of physical systems? Nothing, and I don't understand what their concepts are getting at. That's actually a really good question. Yeah, see, that's fair, Luminance. That's a good question. What's the difference between this and a mathematical model? If I said, what gifts, I have to come up with gifts, say I have to come up for gifts for my family. And I said, look, I have X amount of money. These are the things I could buy with X amount of money I have to spend on gifts. That's not going to be very helpful. The range of things that are purchasable with say I have $20 is immense. I could buy thousands upon thousands of things with $20. You just go online, Amazon, AliExpress, whatever it is. There's just that doesn't narrow the space of what a good idea of a gift is. I have to come up with a metaphor or an analogy of a situation I can think about that would enable me to choose between better scenarios. That's what's happening here. It's not the mathematical structure on its own. It's giving you an idea about the way you think the world not is, but like acts in some sort of similar way, an analogous way, even though it's not actually the right way. Ivan says it's possible that the paper that describes the concepts they use would make this comprehensible. However, they missed a huge opportunity to express theirs in a simple way. Yeah. Well, that's why I think this is I'm with chat here. I'm going to give it a nog navel. I'm going to give it multiple nog navels. This is like so navel gazing because they used so much of the jargon that it was like very impenetrable. You have to there was no need. Like anytime you're using the word nomological, that just means law-like. Now, that's fine. It's not a very hard word to learn, but it's like the idea that you're using all these different terms all at once. It's like it's very, very difficult. Should I give this I'm not as angry about it. I like the point of this article. Like I like the idea that you have to use metaphor, you have to use analogy to give yourself something to get yourself thinking. It's not just a mathematical structure. Mathematical structure does not help us think in a very focused manner. Shane says the mathematical model to approach the situation would have to be determinate or objective with input and that would give determinate output. The method described here allows for a wider approach where subjective input might give objective output. Yes. So if you have, the problem is that with the mathematical model, it's giving you some very, very certain things. It gives you it's garbage in, garbage out. Whatever you put into the mathematical model, you're going to get out. The problem is you're trying to get more out of it. And so the mathematical model is not going to give you any more than was already in that model. You're trying to get more out of it. Like I said, if you just have $20 and you search online for a gift, gifts, there's huge amounts of things of gifts. You have to have a concept, you have to have an idea, and that's the thing. It's a subjective input that is getting somewhere closer to objective reality, but it is not objective. That's the idea. It's like you're using your subjectivity to give yourself a leg up or a starting direction to get yourself somewhere. I know this is a hard concept actually for people. This is how things happen in the real world. You don't just have a physical model and you test it. You have to have some weird idea from somewhere, and then you have to apply it and make it into a mathematical model and then see what happens. You don't know, and where that idea comes from is not always obvious. Tindari says, I like the general idea of models and how they can be used to simplify a scenario to be able to work with a hypothetical scenario when there's not enough data to deal with a real event. Yeah, and this is how people work. If things just get more and more complicated, eventually we have to learn so much that either very few people can do it or eventually no one can. You have to either get so specialized that you have to know so many things that only a few things people can do it, or or alternatively, what you have to do is you have to find new concepts, new ways of viewing it, new metaphors, and then it can be explained to more people, and then you can get more eyes on your problem. If all we ever did was just make more and more complexity, eventually we're just going to run out of things to do because everything would be so complex, and that's bad. Shane says this actually makes perfect sense in sociological terms when it comes to explaining how we make decisions based on stuff like what we think other people will think. Yeah, see, this is exactly where philosophy of science goes. It's like, okay, how do you actually describe things that are not objective? Because that's what was going on here. You're trying to get an objective thing, but but it's a very shaky understanding. You're trying to come up with new concepts for a questionable underlying world. And so this is just in physics how this gets done, and that's what this person's trying to do. They're trying to do this in hard science, physical science. But for once you get out of the physical sciences, this is what's happening all the time. You're trying to come up with new metaphors, new ways of understanding in a shifting world where the underlying matter is, what's the ontology of people? Who knows? It's we're shifty things. So it's I get what they're doing, and they're trying to show that this is the way we actually go about understanding the world, is that we are using non-veridical theories, but it has some sort of analog in the way the world is. Your brain's still trying to figure this out? Ivan says, I know what the sussy research was about. We think that a collection of particles with some known and unknown particles exist. Hey, what's up, Browser Big Bean Burrito? What possible measurements can we make for various combinations parameters? Yeah, but how do you get the idea of like when there's 5 million things? How do you actually start narrowing the field? You have to have an idea of like what's gonna, what will work and what isn't gonna work. But like, where does that come from? Where did it come from? You don't see how that relates to their conceptions? Well, how did they start? You have to start somewhere. That's the question, Ivan. Where did you start? Sure, the process of elimination. That's not answering the question. Where do you start the process of elimination? You have to do the process of elimination. Where does it start? I'm gonna vote meh on this. Like, it was okay, but like the writing made it so painful. So we're gonna get a vote meh. I gave it a nog navel. Is there anything else we need to say here? I mean, I don't think it was poop underneath. I think they had a point, but I don't think it was particularly good. They could have made this said a bit much better. By making predictions of each of the models, discarding models already excluded by the data. There are 5 million data points. Where do you start? You have to have some dumb idea. You can just say you start at the beginning, but like, again, which one do you start with? You start with just the one you like best. The easiest one to do. Whatever the easiest one is, the one that's easiest to explain, the simplest idea, the dumbest thing, you rule that one out first. They sampled randomly. Okay, that's fair. They sampled randomly. Good. But like, fine. You do a random sample, you start doing it. That's fine. You still have to start somewhere. And that's it. If you want to start with a random sample, that's a good thing too. But like, why was the sample randomly chosen? Because they know they didn't care then. That's fine. But you need to have some idea at that point. And their idea was that we don't know, so we're just going to pick something. Okay. Yeah, Shane, that's exactly the thing. Even choosing something at random involves a decision to do so. This is the thing. There is no good one, so you can pick any of them, fine, but you still have to just start somewhere doing one of them. And if you like randomize it, that's fine. You might as well have like let anyone choose. You could ask your kid, which one do I do? You could say, I like this number. I can pick that one. Not if you have no alternative method. Yeah, but it doesn't matter at that point. Random is an illusion. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. That's the point. You can start by having some idea of like, I think the world is this way, or you can use a random selector. It doesn't matter, but you have to start somewhere. And like, that's one of the things here. If you are just ruling things out, you can have just some off the wall thing as long as it's, just as good as starting anywhere else. And maybe that will give you an idea about where to go in the future if things, work out more in one way than another one. If you say, hey, look, that number's a little bit weird. Why did this happen? Maybe there's more to what your weird idea was than you realized. Like in the first example, if the Maxwell hexagonal vortexes, it worked out in some way that worked, even though there was no ether, there was no hexagonal vortex or structure with a vortex in it. A round vortex in a hexagonal structure, but it worked out and it gave Maxwell the stepping stone. That's the idea. You just have to start somewhere with some idea, and sometimes you get lucky. That's all. Yeah. Shane says when you have 5 million points of data, even 1 point of triangulation can substantially narrow the 5 million points down. And that's the idea, is that if you have any idea that anything seems to work, you run that idea down. You follow up all those leads. And so what if it turns out to be wrong? Because if there was something in your weird idea that had any analog in the actual world, then you have, you've made your money. You've already succeeded. Unreal, what's up? Good evening. Just got home from making a trip to visit my mom. Hope your mom's good. Hope I've had a good stream. Yeah, it's not been bad. Been a decent stream. Just, doing the voting thing here. It all costs money. What I'm learning from these streams is that if I use big words, string them together and copy paste other words from other people and put them in a paper, you can get published. Yes, that's true. I will shit on you though if you do that, because I'll be like, this is a terrible paper. Ivan says, let me give you a good scope example. A good example. When Dirac thought about a sea of electrons that prevent electrons from emitting all of their energy, he realized that a hole in the sea of electrons had all the properties of an electron, but opposite charge. Yeah. And so this was like the whole theory of electrons. Yeah. The electron sea is fictional. It would have an infinite mass and charge, but the result, it was a theory of antiparticles. Exactly. He came up with something thinking of something weird. And that got him somewhere. But like, that's the same thing here. They had 5 million points. They didn't know what to do with them. If you come up with an idea and it actually, you ran it down and it became something, that's great. Tindari says, but isn't this what is already done and worked in with climate change models by the IPCC, where they work with different hypothetical models and demonstrate what could happen if these models are related to reality and how we can prevent those taken into place? Yeah, I assume people are doing this. This paper is just trying to explain the benefit, the specific benefits of doing that practice, where it's showing you don't have to look at certain ideas because, you know, by like sort of like talking it out, then we've talked it out and say, look, some of those ideas turn kind of ridiculous, you know? Shane says, if there are 5 million people around me and someone is going to talk to me, I ask that person to make a noise. And even me being able to discern which ear was closest to the person speaking means you're going to eliminate a huge chunk of the crowd. Yeah. Yeah. But why did they talk about the sussy research? Yeah, Ivan, that's a good question. Like I said, I don't think their history was great. Like, whatever they were doing, I'm not entirely sure. Like, I was complaining about the history of the Maxwell. And if you were saying that their sussy stuff was a little bit off too, that's a little bit concerning. That, like, they couldn't get their history right. But I don't know. Maybe there was more to the history than either of us realized. I don't care, in the sense that, like, they could have picked other examples. But again, like, the writing here was just a little bit painful. Too many big words. They could have made things simpler. And we think their examples were a little bit ill-informed. I think their overall message, I mean, I understood it. I agreed with it. I just don't think they, I just don't think they said it very well. They're saying there's like, the whole point was that, like, there's things to be learned by talking through different ideas. Even if you don't think the ideas are right in the end, you can find out things about the different possibilities that you want to actually investigate. Because as long as your ideas have some relation to reality, then talking through them will give you new ideas about directions to go. And that's about it. Like, it had an idea. I just think they didn't execute it very well. Should I give this a grape? I said a navel gazing. I think, like, their big claims didn't shrivel up. They just really said it painfully. Okay. Anyway, anyone else want to get their rating in? This is the last call. Last call for ratings, and then we'll go find someone to raid. Luminance gave it a vote meh. Okay. Roar. I'll add that one as well. Well, I appreciate it.